Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She is the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is July 31st, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I will be your host. You can send us your questions via email to questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them on the chat page. Well, Helga, we've had two very serious provocations in the last 2 days: the murder of a Hezbollah leader in Beirut, and then yesterday, the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, a leader of Hamas, in Tehran. These occur after Netanyahu spoke at the US Congress and said Israel is prepared to go to war with Iran and wants the United States to be a partner in that. Uh, do you think this portends the spread into a larger regional war? And is there anything that can be done to stop Israel from continuing this rampage of killing?
Well, I think we are on the verge of a catastrophe if this course is not reversed, because obviously Netanyahu's visit in the United States had one main aim: to assure that the United States would back up whatever Netanyahu would be doing. And unfortunately, given the incredible performance of the US Congress, who I think applauded and interrupted Netanyahu 58 times, in part with standing ovations, basically, signaling all the way, the United States is with Israel. And Defense Secretary Austin said, when he was asked what would be the position of the United States, he said that, which was the only answer, that the United States would stand with Israel and be on the defense of Israel. Now, that is an unbelievable situation. I think we are on the verge of not only a regional war, one step more, and it becomes a regional war involving, Lebanon, involving Israel, possibly even Iran. And then the question is, if the United States backs Israel all the way, and then, obviously Iran, which has, strengthened its relationship with Russia and China in the recent period very much, that we could be in a few moments, in a few eyelash twinkles, or whatever you call this, we could be on the verge of a global nuclear war. And this is so absolutely disgusting that I think the only thing which can be done, which would be efficient, would be that the United States changes that attitude and basically tells Israel to stop. Nothing else will function. So I think this is terrible, and it puts, it's one step more, showing the utter contempt of the Western, system, if you want, so the collective West, or US, Nato, this whole alliance, utter disrespect for legality, utter disrespect for anything. I mean, just remind yourself that the International Court of Justice, not very long ago, made two rulings. One, this was the International Criminal Court naming Netanyahu as a war criminal, and then the International Court of Justice ruling that all the settlements by Israel in the West Bank, in Gaza, in parts of the Golan Heights are all illegal, and therefore the whole settlers policy is illegal. So this puts the world on the edge of the abyss. And it just demonstrates, that the solution at this point, unfortunately, can only come from the United States, and that does not look very promising, given the fact that the Congress seems to be completely in the pocket of, those who obviously are financing the campaigns of congressmen and senators. And, given the fact that, the Biden administration did do nothing to restrain Netanyahu from what he is doing in Gaza, and what will be the policy of Trump, who is not yet anywhere close to the White House, obviously, is an open question. So it looks really bleak.
So we have a question from Debashis, who sends in questions periodically. He asks, was the assassination of Haniya a calculated attempt to save Netanyahu's own neck? We have another question on the assassination of Haniya. Was he supporting China's role in Palestinian reconciliation? And could his assassination therefore be seen as a response to China's role in the Middle East?
Well, I think the answer to both questions is yes, because Netanyahu very obviously is aware, first of all, with a growing opposition inside Israel. There was, 2 days ago, almost a palace coup, inside the cabinet, where, basically elements of the government were backing up actions by the IDF. In any case, he has a mess at his hands inside his own coalition. The outside opposition is growing. And obviously, Netanyahu at this point is driving this thing forward in large part to save his neck, but probably that's not the only motive, but that's a very strong motive. Concerning Ismail Haniya, he was obviously the main negotiator in the deal, or in the effort to get a deal on the hostages. So to kill that counterpart means, the hostage negotiation is now in a basically hopeless situation. And naturally, the effort by China to move in the direction to get some resolution of the entire conflict by unifying all the Palestinian groups, that has been, obviously now targeted as well. So I think this is, this is definitely bringing the world to the edge of a catastrophe, and therefore I think an initiative called for by Chandra Mustafa from Malaysia, who is basically having a resolution now to move the entire issue of what is happening in Gaza to a UN General Assembly, given the fact that there was a stalemate in the UN Security Council. I think this is now gaining utmost prominence and should be supported really strongly by anybody who not only cares about peace in the Middle East, but who cares about world peace.
Now, you mentioned that this is something the United States could do, but it's highly unlikely given the instability politically in the United States, what we saw from the Congress. But we have a question from an Austrian blogger who covers Southwest Asia. She said that she agrees with you that Netanyahu seems to have taken the reception he received in the Congress as a go-ahead to do whatever he wants. So she asks, is there any other action that could be taken against them short of war, for example, in the United Nations, expelling Israel from the UN?
Well, I think the initiative of Chandra Mustafa should, and we will post it under the show after we are done. I think that needs to be discussed internationally, because it's sort of the last resort. This Uniting for Peace clause, whereby if the UN Security Council is tied up, blocked, as it has been because of the continuous veto of the United States, then, this is the last option to put the whole issue to the UN General Assembly. And I think that should be done, on an emergency basis. Absolutely.
Now we have a question from someone asking about the discussion last week on the Orban initiative. Where does that stand? Is there still a move from von der Leyen and the European Union to remove Orban or to punish Hungary? And is there any motion toward his proposal for a peace conference on Ukraine?
Well, I'm sure that he is continuously organizing for that. As of now, I can only say that I think the Polish government, I think it was even the foreign minister, I'm not entirely sure now, made a proposal to kick out Orban out of the EU by, making a text saying, if he dislikes the EU so much, why doesn't he leave? Now, that may not be a bad idea, because the EU in its present form is utterly an instrument of NATO. As a matter of fact, there is no difference between what NATO is doing with all the, provocations with global NATO and what that implies, and the EU. This was cemented by Ursula von der Leyen. I think it's almost 2 years ago when there was the NATO summit in Madrid. I think it was in January of 23. Yeah, I think it was January 23, where von der Leyen and Stoltenberg basically said that NATO and the EU are completely united, and obviously this has incredible implications, because now that NATO is becoming global NATO, there's right now, I think, maneuvers taking place. Pistorius, the German defense minister, is running around in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and other places where the ridiculous participation of 2 German warships is showing German strength in the Pacific. It's a joke. It's ridiculous, but it's not so ridiculous because it's part of trying to go into a real military buildup. There was just a new report published, I think, by some entity in the Congress, saying, the United States right now would not be prepared for a simultaneous war with Russia and China. Therefore, there must be an absolute buildup of the military production. Good luck for that. They don't have much production left. But in any case, there is a tremendous war push. It's going on in Europe. Pistorius is, totally in line with this NATO-US policy. And I think, the situation is really one where while I do not exclude that the whole situation could go out of control, either in Ukraine or now with the terribly dangerous situation in the Middle East. But nevertheless, they are building for the coming war with Russia and China. Pistorius had said, without any backing of facts, that Russia would be prepared to attack NATO by 2029. So what you see is a war mania, a militaristic hysteria building up in the countries of the West, and to the extent, obviously, they are losing out because all they can offer is military, alliances, military training, all of this, while China is going in a completely different direction, and the BRICS in general, offering economic cooperation, bringing economic benefits to the countries who cooperate. And obviously, the only answer people find in the West is elites, or the so-called elites in the West, to respond to that with a military buildup, which, if not reversed, is going to lead to the end of civilization. And I think that has to be gotten across to people, because these people are playing with nuclear war.
You mentioned Pistorius and the situation in Germany. We do have a question, and before I get to the question, let me remind people you're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Helga's been very active in building an international peace coalition, and we'll be having again it's now I think the 56th consecutive week coming up this Friday, and people can find out about that and participate in that, because it's an urgent, as you can hear from what Helga is saying, it's urgent that there be a reaction from the citizens. Now, this is from someone who's a citizen of Germany, who said, why aren't the Greens and the German government protesting the placement of long-range missiles nuclear-capable missiles in Germany? The Greens grew as a party in the 1980s due to their opposition to placing U.S. missiles in Germany. What happened?
Well, I think the transformation of a supposedly pacifist party into the most war hawkish, militaristic, aggressive party of all of Germany really was, I think, instrumentalized by Joschka Fischer, who in 1999, backed the NATO, the illegitimate NATO war against Yugoslavia. And ever since this tendency has grown. And if you look at what Baerbock is saying these days, you cannot differentiate what she says from what Blinken says or any one of these war hawks in the United States. Whenever she appears with Blinken in an international setting, it looks like that they are twins, grown together at the hips, joined at the hips, because they say the same thing, they even look the same thing, they have the same dark look in their eyes. Watch out for it. No, I think the Greens have become a complete bellicose, militaristic party, but I think they have lost any character as such. They are just now an adjunct of NATO.
Okay, we have a question on the U.S. political situation. John from Tennessee writes, there are reports that Harris is more responsive to the idea of ending the suffering of Palestinians than Biden. Is that possibly true, or is that just a cover story? Because she's a full supporter of the Ukraine war.
Well, I think that, Kamala Harris has been a very unshining little person for the last 3.5 years. She has not come out with any significant statement on her own. Now she has the benefit of a tremendous media hype, and naturally they are trying to appeal to certain layers, like young people, female voters, and so forth. So I don't have any confidence that she would be anything different than those people who have obviously controlled the Biden administration from the very beginning, namely what Ray McGovern calls the MITIMEC, the military industrial congressional academic think tank media complex. And I can only say that, unfortunately, the only voices of reason are not in the presidential campaign, because also Robert Kennedy has said things concerning the Middle East which don't give you much hope that he really does understand the whole matter. I think the only voices of reason are coming from two candidates from New York, one from senatorial candidate Diane Sayre and another one from the candidate for Congress from the Bronx, Jose Vega. And I would only hope that a coalition of independent candidates is lining up with them to become a strong voice in this situation.
Okay, here's a question from Vancouver, Canada, referring to the obscene spectacle at the Paris Olympics of a flotilla of boats, which included a disgraceful portrayal of the Leonardo painting of the Last Supper as a drag queen ceremony. This person writes, do you know if Macron had a hand in the blasphemous disgrace in the opening of the Paris Olympics? And is there a reaction in France, especially among religious Catholics, to this kind of disgraceful behavior?
I'm pretty sure that Macron had a say in that. I don't know for sure, but I would assume it, given the fact that he put so much emphasis on the Olympics. He even said that, after the parliament election, where his party did very badly and the new government is likely to be extremely unstable, whatever it turns out to be, that he forget everything, let's concentrate now on the Olympics. So, I think he has a big investment in the Olympics, and unfortunately, this idea that, that there's now denials, saying it was not Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, it was some other painting which portrayed the Dionysius in Greece, and so was the whole debate. But the point is, it was utterly disgusting. It was an assault on Christianity. The French Bishops' Conference strongly protested it, but even more strongly, and I think this is really a sign of the times, was the government of Iran, by basically saying that, that this was an attack on one of the leading prophets, Jesus Christ. So they protested stronger than anybody in France from the Catholic Church, or even Germany protested. The bishops protested there. But I think this is, it's like, and probably, if we survive this present escalation of, the situation in the Middle East and Ukraine, which is not less dangerous by no means, then this image of the absolute demonstration of ugliness and degeneracy, as it was demonstrated around the opening ceremony of the Olympics, will be like the sign of a dying empire. This is like the last phase of the Roman Empire, where all kinds of perversions grew. And that is a sign that obviously the establishments have lost a sense not only of artistic beauty, but of any kind of civilized behavior. So this is tragic, but we cannot make that the last word. Let me just add something which I should have mentioned earlier to the question of the person from Germany. The decision of the United States, according to Chancellor Scholz, to put long-range missiles into Germany starting in 2026 must be prevented. And, I think that, this would mean not only a repetition of the middle-range missile crisis of the beginning of the 80s, the Pershing II SS-20 crisis, but in the present constellation of things where all nuclear arms treaties have practically been thrown out, starting with the unilateral refusal of the United States of the ABM Treaty in 2002, and then the cancellation by Trump of the INF Treaty in 2019, Putin answered to all of this by basically saying that if these missiles are installed in Germany, it will have a mirror response. Now, that means they will put in middle-range or long-range missiles which are nuclear capable. And if it comes to any kind of escalation, it will make Germany and Europe the nuclear battlefield of the coming Third World War. And, given the fact one of our contributors to many programs from East Germany, a military analyst, Professor Schreiber, recently made the emphatic point that, Germany is not war capable, not war ready, as Pistorius is saying, but war capable, meaning that if you have a heavily populated area with heavy industrialized regions, you cannot have a war. You're destroying everything. You're destroying the people, you're destroying the industry, the infrastructure. So the very existence of Germany would be at stake if it comes to that. And therefore, I think we have to, and I will ask the International Peace Coalition to take this up emphatically, we have to get the people aware of what the implication of that is, that who in the United States has the right to make a decision which puts into jeopardy the existence of the German state. And Scholz, when he says the United States made that decision and that was a good decision. Is he the Chancellor of Germany, or is he the Chancellor of the 51 state of the United States? I mean, this has to be answered with a very clear mobilization of the German people in the streets.
Now, on that, Helga, we have a question from someone who picked up on the discussion we had last week of the Council of Reason. He writes that he hears now that Modi is going to Kiev. There's been a series of initiatives taken by nations of the Global South and the BRICS to intervene to stop this war policy from the West. And there's a fairly clear rejection of U.S. NATO policy. So he asks, is there an effort being made to recruit heads of state from some of these countries, including Modi, leaders of some of the African countries, to join the Council of Reason?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, we are basically asking all our supporters, all our activists, all our institutional contacts to help us to throw out a net, so to speak, to find those people who would fit that qualification. And I would not put it behind it. I mean, obviously, this is a question of diplomacy, and people have all kinds of, and governments have all kinds of obligations. But I think that if you look at the interventions of China, of Lula from Brazil, of Modi, of Erdogan from Turkey, and basically you had repeatedly African leaders going to Kiev, going to Moscow. You had Cardinal Parolin traveling to Kiev recently. So I think that some of these governments and institutional representatives are already acting on the level, but I think that this is still a very uphill organizing battle to try to put this together. There are already several, I would say, half a dozen of people who have definitely committed to be part of this club, Council of Reason, and who have the kind of institutional standing to be part of that. Others are still considering it, and I can only, basically ask you, help us to find the people. And it takes a lot of networking, because it basically means people have to have the courage to step forward and say, we are on the brink of the abyss of destruction of everything, and therefore we are offering a different set of policies, and that takes courage. So the best way to support such an effort is the more people get involved to help organizing it, the more likely it will succeed.
I have a final question for you that has to do with your significant intervention last weekend in a presentation to a conference in Orvieto, Italy, where you issued a call for a new classical renaissance to counter the organized degeneration of culture in the West. As I see it, your presentation was an elaboration of the theme that underlies your 10 principles for a new strategic and development architecture. As you wrote in the 10th principle that, quote, the basic assumption for the new paradigm is that man is fundamentally good and capable to infinitely perfect the creativity of his mind and the beauty of his soul, and that is what gives mankind the capability to overcome evil. Now, given that, your call for a classical renaissance was well received there. There's a question for you from someone who read about this, I think, in our briefing. He asks, do you think it's still possible to save civilization given the degeneration of the accepted cultural norms advanced by the dominant media culture? And if you want to say something about the conference, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, yeah, what you are quoting there is my response to the organization which invited me to participate in this conference, which is a new party in Italy. It's called Independencia, independence. And I was very impressed because what some of the leading people there were saying, who organized this conference in the beautiful, actually medieval town of Orvieto, which is situated on the top of a hill. It has a very famous cathedral from I think it's from the 14th century or 14th century, incredibly beautiful. And the roads are too small for cars to go through, too narrow. It had an incredible charm of the time where it was built. In any case, at this conference, the organizers of this Independencia made the point that this is the second wave of trying to create sovereignist movements, shedding the control of supranational bureaucracies like the EU, and that they do not want to repeat the mistakes of the first sovereignist movement, which was to follow neoliberal economic policies and allow Islamophobe tendencies. And then, they also called for a revival of European Greek, Roman, Christian culture. So I felt very, very encouraged by that to, basically point to the fact that, that we have to go back and revive the best traditions of European civilization, which is the ancient Greek tradition of Socrates, of Plato, of the great tragedians, some of the great sculptures. The very idea of the good, the beautiful, and the truth as being one, which was one of the core ideas of that period, and how that idea was revived in the Italian Renaissance, the Golden Renaissance of the 15th century, which overcame the Dark Age of the 14th century, which was one of the gigantic contributions, which really laid the foundation for European civilization for the following 600 years. So I think that the idea to go back to the greatest ideas, of Dante, Petrarca, Brunelleschi, the architect who created the Cathedral of Florence, and many, many beautiful ideas coming out of the Golden Renaissance, not least of which the idea of the sovereign nation state, which was a combination of the increase of urbanization of that period, but especially the concepts of Nicolaus of Cusa, who developed for the first time the idea that government is only legitimate if it has the consent of the governed, and that you need the representative reciprocal system between the government and the governed, mediated by the representatives which are elected, as the absolute stepping stone to create the foundation of national sovereignty. And that concept has nothing to do with chauvinism or imperialism, because people always say, but 2 world wars were created by exaggerated nationalism. That's not true. 2 world wars were created by empires, by imperialisms. And the nation state was the sovereign nation state was one of the great accomplishments of European civilization, relevant for, if you want to have any kind of peaceful order today, it has to start with the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. It has to start with the concept of the absolute sovereignty of all as the foundation of any kind of peaceful coexistence. So I think this was a very important conference, and I am sure that these ideas will resonate in the coming period a lot.
Well, I think I saw your responses up on the Schiller Institute website today. If they're not there, they should be there, but people can go there and read your speech and your responses, because it really does exemplify the kind of beautiful intervention that's necessary if we're going to change the world. So Helga, I've run out of questions. Any final words from you?
Well, stay tuned, because this situation in Southwest Asia is on the edge. it could escalate into a big war in no time. So please join on Friday, 5 o'clock or 11 o'clock, depending where you are, the International Peace Coalition, because I'm 100% sure that that will be one of the, if not the major topic at that conference, and what to do about it.
All right. Well, we'll see you then on Friday.
Yes, see you then.